Hey, well, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the time zone. I would like to welcome you all to our candidate roundtable working at a small college/university. Today, we'll be having a panel conversation with senior housing officers on what it's like living and working in a small college or university environment, as well as how it may differ from a previous experience that you have had thus far. I will gladly turn it over to the panel, and we are super excited to be having this conversation with you all.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. My name is Drew Peterson. I'll be your moderator for today's session. Before we begin, I'm going to pull up a screen and just run through a couple of quick ground rules for us. Hopefully you can see our splash screen. And if I go ahead and click begin slideshow, there we go. So welcome. We are glad you are thinking big and maybe thinking of thinking small. Talking with us about what it's like to work in a small school environment and how it might differ from other work experiences. A few notes about today's session. The first one is once I go through these few things, I'm going to pull down this presentation and we want to have a real conversation with you. So this will not be your traditional webinar or roundtable presentation where it's just the three of us talking. We want to be engaged with each of you. So please feel free to take part and connect with us. If possible, it is helpful to have your webcam on to help us engage with you and with one another. Please, if you can, put any comments or questions you have into the chat function so that we can keep track of those and answer them as we go. But certainly anytime you have a question, we want to be here to answer them for you. Those of us who are on the panel are part of an Akuhoi group called our Small College and University Experts in Residence program. We have put together that program this year, and really the intent is to find the best practices and best ways to support our members who are at smaller institutions. One thing you might ask is, who is a member of Akuhoi? Any school that has an Akuhoi membership, if you work there, you are a member. And so no matter where you go or where you find yourselves, if you are working at an Akuhoi institution, make sure you get all of the benefits of being a member. A couple of the folks who are not on our panel today, but I do want to take just a second and introduce them to you. The first one is Isaiah Thomas, and he's at Occidental College in Los Angeles, California. We have Lynn Cashin-Basso, who's at Mount St. Vincent, which is up in Nova Scotia, Canada. And then Robin Gagnow at Baldwin Wallace, which is in Berea, Ohio, just outside of Cleveland. From there, I'm going to go on and we will each introduce ourselves, those of us who are actually here today. So as I said at the beginning of this, my name is Andrew Peterson. I am the Associate Dean of Students and Director of Residence Life here at Presbyterian College. I've been here for 7 years, and Presbyterian is in Clinton, South Carolina, which is wonderful and sunny and warm at the moment, and I'm very thankful for it. In addition to my work in housing and residence life, I also oversee our student conduct process, our summer conferences process, and serve on our Diversity, Inclusion, and Action Committee. And then as well, I serve as the chairperson for our Akuhoi Experts in Residence program. And with that, I will turn it over to Gail to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Gail Sims-Aubert. I work at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay, in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Here on campus, I have gone through a title change. I'm actually the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Inclusivity and Student Affairs. Housing continues to be one of the functions that I manage in my portfolio. I have been here about 7.5 years. So it's good to be with all of you today and share a little bit about the small college experience. With that, I'll turn it over to Beth.
You would think I would know where the mute button is by now. Sorry, guys. Hi, everybody. I am Beth Ackman. I am the Director of Residence Life at SUNY Morrisville. We are in Central New York. I don't know how else to explain where Morrisville is. It's a tech sector for the SUNY system. I've been here for 5 years. And now it's Stephen's turn.
Thank you, Beth. Hi, everyone. My name is Stephen Corres. I'm the Associate Dean for Residence Life and Off-Campus Housing at the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia, PA. I've been here for about a year and some change, almost 2 years now. I actually was recently promoted to this. I was the previous Director of Residence Life. And so I've been here for almost 2 years. And generally speaking, I really enjoy working in small schools like this and niche schools like this, whether it be a tech school or an art school. And outside of residence life and outside of my role here, I also serve on Akuhoi as the chair-elect for the new member committee.
And with that, as I said, I'm going to stop sharing screen. We've got a couple of questions that we can answer for you, but like I said, as you have questions, please put them into the chat and we will tackle them one at a time. The first question I had for the group, just to add a little more context, since Strengths Quest tells me that's one of my top 5, is just thinking about, have you always worked at a small school, or if each of the panelists can tell us about their experience working at small schools? And whichever of you would like to go first can take it.
I guess I can go first. So I have primarily always worked at small schools. I did attend a small school as well for undergrad. The only large school experience I had was during grad school. I did a small internship at NYU. But other than that, I have always worked at traditionally smaller institutions, highly selective private schools as well. And one of the reasons being is just, it's kind of what I said before. I enjoy niche groups. So my previous experience was also working at tech schools. And, now I kind of transitioned into the arts. I've always worked in these small groups. And I think I find that one of the reasons I gravitate towards smaller schools is the almost community aspect of it that comes with working in such a small environment. So you, generally speaking, when you're working at like a Rutgers or a bigger, school, you probably won't know most of your students that are not residential students. I can say that I know most of my students that are not residential students working at a small school. Or if I don't know them, I know their face, and I can have a conversation with them. And to me, that's pretty important when it comes to just kind of immersing yourself in the institution and kind of being a part of the community overall, and not just sitting on some role in residence life. It's harder to do that in a big school. And there are some challenges also, though, working in a small school. I mean, you do get to wear a lot of hats. And that's both a plus and a negative, but that's kind of my take on small schools and why I really enjoy them. So I'll let somebody else speak now.
Thanks, Stephen. I can go ahead and jump in. I too have predominantly spent most of my career at small schools, small public schools. I did for a time as a full-time professional work for a large institution. Very thankful to have had that experience, but I found myself after a couple of years gravitating back towards a smaller campus setting. And I think one of the things that has continued, not only attracted me, but continues to hold my interest in retain, being able to be retained at small campuses is, as Stephen said, the ability to wear multiple hats and to venture into other areas. Been very fortunate through my experiences predominantly in housing to be shoulder tapped to serve in different roles, whether that be to lead fraternity and sorority life, to serve as an interim university conduct officer. I've also been able to manage for a short time dining and catering at my current campus. I even served for about 10 months as the interim vice chancellor for student affairs. And so again, very, very thankful for the ability to branch into other areas, but I've also been overtly supported to pursue other professional development activities. I served as the president of UMR Akuhoi a few years back, and found that because of the small school setting and the amount of teamwork that we were able to generate, that it made some of those things possible for me. And so again, I feel that I've really been able to flourish as a professional in a small school setting.
Hi, everybody. And I have been at small to medium size, and I've been state and private. Like, some people joke about my timeline of work because it goes like state, private, private, state, private, private. So like now that I'm on a state, my next job should be private. If you look at my resume. So everybody laughs at that. Also, my next move should be a middle-sized school and not a small, even though I prefer small. I went to small for undergrad, went to small for my MBA, but that is kind of like the joke. Like one of my friends is like, well, you're at that 5-year mark. Are we going to go on to that middle school that's a private? And I'm like, middle size? I'm like, no. And they're like, are you sure? It's about time. And I'm like, that's okay, we're good. So I really do like working with different diversity groups though. So like at one of my schools, I was a historically Black college. Another school I was at like a third white, third Black, third Hispanic population. I really like that aspect. Most of my career has been D2 athletics. This is my first time D3 athletics. So that's a little interesting when it comes to the housing world. So just different things like that have always made the job a little different. I do like wearing multiple hats. I don't like the COVID hat though. I'm not going to lie to y'all. The COVID hat can like disappear. So I'll just put that out there for everybody on the call.
Yeah, the COVID hat can go away anytime. We're all counting on it. I too have been predominantly at small schools. I did my undergrad at Allegheny College, which is up in Northwest Pennsylvania. Worked for a little over 7 years at Ohio Wesleyan, which is in Central Ohio. Interestingly enough, got my master's at the Ohio State University while I was working at Ohio Wesleyan. So, able to really see that difference between larger schools and smaller schools, and then have worked at PC here for the last 7 years. Beth, you mentioned, sports divisions. Most of my experience was with D3 schools. However, Presbyterian College is the smallest Division I institution in the country, at a little over 1,000 students and almost 40% of them being Division I athletes. That is quite a unique thing we have on our campus. I'm starting to see some really great questions here in the chat. The first one is, what is a small school? It's absolutely not a silly question. It is something that we ask ourselves many times, and we've actually discussed that in our experts in residence group. For right now, the way we've been defining it from an Akuhoi standpoint is schools with less than 3,000 beds on campus. We know even within that, there is a lot of variability. Certainly a school with 100 or 200 beds looks very different from 2,500 or 3,000 beds. But just in general, that's kind of the number we've been using is less than 3,000. And then we've started to talk about the pros and cons, and I think we'll come back to that. But Connor asks a really great question. What advice do you have for marketing transferable skills gained at large institutions to working at smaller institutions? Are there particular skills to emphasize when interviewing at a smaller school? And the first thing I want to say is, I've heard lots of us on the panel say most of our experience has been at small schools. But I have worked with and hired lots of people who do not have small school experience, either as an undergrad or part of their master's program. And I don't necessarily think that's a disadvantage or a problem. I think this is a really great question to get into. What is it that small schools are looking at? So Gail, Beth, Stephen, do any of you want to jump in with what you think is important as they do these interviews?
Well, I can jump in. One of the things that first comes to mind for me, and not that this is specific to a large school setting, but one of the things I would be curious about would be any activity you've had with a behavioral intervention team or a care team, student behavior management, crisis intervention, right? Because we all strive to create a safety net of sorts for our students, an environment in which they thrive in. And so any experiences that you would have with any of those services or any of those committees would be of particular interest, because again, oftentimes at a small school, our resources might be limited, and we would be looking to gain from any of that experience that you would bring to the table from a larger institution.
Yeah, and I can jump in and, just to kind of piggyback a little bit on where Gail was coming from, I think also it would probably be really important to speak to your flexibility as well, in what you're able to manage and kind of what your time is like. At a small school, it's hard. It really is hard to sometimes have a traditional 9 to 5, which I know in Res Life we normally don't have to begin with, but it's easier done in a bigger school from what I've seen, whereas in a smaller school you do tend to wear a lot of hats. So it's important that you're flexible. If, things like weekends and things like certain events and certain holidays, certain times of year that you might not be working in a small school, you probably will be doing something in some capacity in a smaller school, I should say. Also, I think you need to speak to your collaboration and your history with collaboration and your experience collaborating with other departments specifically. That's going to be a big factor. And in a lot of small schools, a lot of the work we do, because we're wearing multiple hats and because we are kind of almost like a jack of all trades in many ways, you kind of need to speak and highlight how you've managed that and done that in some capacity in your bigger institutions. So whether it's working with Greek life on a program, or whether it's working with student life during orientation and how you collaborated for training and stuff like that. I can't begin to tell you how many times we do things jointly sometimes in a smaller school because it saves money. Budgets are a little bit different than a bigger school too. So it saves money and it saves time and it saves energy. And if we can get a speaker in a big school, I've noticed that you can get a guest speaker to come in for a training for your department. Here at a smaller school, it tends to be the case where you usually have to get like 3 or 4 departments to kind of go in on a guest speaker, and it's supposed to be for like a number of students and not just like 10 or 20 RAs. So collaboration and how well you work with other departments is going to be a big thing that'll come up in some of the questions for a small school.
Also, Spelman and Johnson a lot of the times will review your resume for free. So, or for a very small fine. So let somebody look at your resume. Also, make sure you're meeting the things that are out there for the job position. So answering a couple of your other questions are in here with this because it kind of all goes together. There's not like a full transition from a large to a small college. Like many times you're doing a lot of the same things. It's just at small colleges, you might get to have a little bit more hands in everything versus a larger institution. Sometimes you're just doing housing, you're just doing your building, or you're sharing your building with somebody as a new professional staff member, RD. At a small school, you might get 2 buildings, you might get 3 buildings, but they're all little compared to like at those bigger institutions, you could have a tower that you're splitting with somebody. Okay. What are the benefits of starting in higher ed at a small school? If residence life might not be your cup of tea, and I'm totally going to be honest because you're all young professionals, majority. Residence life is a great starting point. Great starting point. But if you are not 100% sure that you want to do residence life, but you want to do higher ed in student affairs, if you're at a small private school, you can literally look at that. Like you can go and do stuff with student activities because you're probably going to get asked to. You can go do stuff with academic advising because you're probably going to be asked to. Your liaison reach is much quicker at a smaller school sometimes than at a larger institution. The resources are definitely there at a larger institution that we sometimes have to shuffle for at a smaller institution, but your professional growth could easily go up very quickly. Also, mentoring, you sometimes can meet that VP right away versus if you're at a bigger institution, you might never even know them. You might just know their name. Also, the president might know you of the college versus sometimes at those bigger institutions. Are you a student or are you an RD? You get that question a lot. So there's perks about it, but there's also not perks about it. It matters what you want for your future. So what I always say is like, look at what fits you best. Also look for the area. You have to be ready to move in higher ed, especially in residence life. A lot of times you have to move on to move up. So don't be shocked by that, but like know the area you're interviewing. The one thing I always have a concern with students that are interviewing at Morrisville, or students or professional staff or whatever, is that we're in the middle of a cornfield, literally, and our closest big city is 40 minutes away, and no, you cannot get Uber Eats. So like, if those are things that you want on your radar, make sure you can get those things at the college that you're going to go work for. Because if you want Uber Eats, which is what one of my RDs wants right now, that's the only reason why I'm bringing this up. You can't get Uber Eats at Morrisville unless you want to pay a lot of money. So just know where you're interviewing, know what the climate's like. Ask anybody on us, like any of us. When we're done with this, feel free to give us a call, shoot us an email. I am more than willing to help, but definitely work with your mentor and find the best fit for you. Do you want everybody to know you? If you do, come on aboard. Welcome to the small school world. If you would like to be able to be a little bit in the shadows for a little bit and get your idea of what higher ed is, bigger institutions, you can do that at easier, just to be honest. And if anybody disagrees with me, feel free to cut in. That's just my take on it.
I was actually going to piggyback on your question that you're answering right now to what are the benefits of starting your higher ed career at a smaller school. One of the things people don't talk about when it comes to small versus big and private versus state is money. I know we all love our job. I know we all love the things that we do, but the reality is most of us have debt for the rest of our lives, and money is a big factor. And I once I was at a grad school, I was like, I don't care about the money. I just care about the students. But you realize really quickly when you have Navient and all these other folks creeping up on you that no, you got to care about the money a little bit more than you think you do. Tears indeed, my friend, tears indeed. That being said, the reason why I think, in my opinion, and please feel free to chime in, anyone who doesn't agree or has a different perspective. If you start off as an RD at a big state school, oftentimes I will share, especially like in a bigger city or near a city, oftentimes the starting salary is really, really nice. Yes, for an RD position. It might be in the 50s, which is usually unheard of for an RD position. You get consistent raises a lot of the times because you might be unionized. And you could be making well into, I knew an RD who was making almost $70,000 a year as an RD who was there. Here's the problem with that. If you then, when it's time for you to move from being an RD, because you should not be an RD for the rest of your life. You don't want to retire from being an RD. At some point, you want to move up and move on. It becomes really hard to, once you've been making a certain amount of money and become accustomed to a certain lifestyle with that money, to then transition. You're going to be looking at smaller schools, or you're going to be looking at other schools, and it's going to be really hard to say, get an assistant director position who's going to pay you that $70,000 a year. You're going to have to take a cut. I learned that because at one of the small schools I was at, I was making really great money. And then I literally had to take a $10,000 pay cut for the next one, because there's a big difference between state and private and the finance that comes with it, and big and small. So make sure, I think it makes sense to start off in a smaller school, because then if you do go to a big state school in the future, you will see that pay increase significantly. I will tell you that is a perk of working at a state school. I'm not going to lie. That being said, going from a state school to a small school, and especially in an entry-level position, a lot of folks end up taking massive pay cuts because there's a big pay difference there. Generally speaking, an RD position, from what I've seen, at least in my area, which is PA, Philly, New York City, New Jersey area, tends to be an RD position will tend to be like 38 to 42,000. At a bigger state school, it could be like in the 50s. So yeah, just you got to look at the finances of it all as well.
And in the chat, I think Dan makes a great point about cost of living. That's an important part of job searching. You look at what you spend living in a large urban environment versus what you're spending living in a small town. You might not have Uber Eats, but certainly what you're going to pay if you have to, go to the doctors or go to this or do that, you are likely to be spending a lot less. So use some of those different calculators you can find online for cost of living. But the other thing to consider beyond cost of living is also just the environment you want to live in. You may very well want to live in a city, and so if that's where you want to start and the pay starts out better there, go for it. If you are somebody who comes from a smaller town or is comfortable trying out a smaller town, that can also be really great too. I joke sometimes, I have friends who work in LA, who work in New York City, who work in some of those bigger places. In 3 hours, they can maybe get to the other side of the city. In 3 hours, where I'm at in South Carolina, I can either be at the beach or I can be in the mountains. So there's, lots of those things outside of just the position description that you're going to want to be thinking about. And location isn't just about where that school is, but also where it can allow you to go when you need to get away for a couple hours or a long weekend, whenever we are able to travel again. The other thing I wanted to go back to, a point that Stephen made earlier, was just talking about those relationships and working together and talking about that when you are in interviews. I think for so many of us in our graduate school programs, we've talked about, working across silos as kind of this idealistic thing. When you're at a small school, it's not idealistic, it's an absolute must. You have to be on committees with faculty members and other staff members. You have to have great relationships with your housekeepers, your dining hall staff, all the way on up through VPs and the president. It is just an expectation that you will make and, work through any troubles with those relationships, because we need to. We're all in it together and we're all we got. You don't have the opportunity to kind of, if somebody is frustrating you in a different department, kind of end around by working with somebody else. There's only a couple of people in that department. And so, anything you can do to talk about those good people skills, working through difficult situations with people who may have frustrated you in the past, those are excellent things to bring up. It's okay to have differences of opinion with people. It's how did you work through that and what did you learn from it, is really what those of us on the other side of the table are going to be listening for.
The things I don't ask the typical questions when I'm interviewing candidates. I don't. I ask, like, how did you handle, like, building a relationship with a student? Can you answer that? Because sometimes people can't, because they've never taken the time to actually build that relationship with a student. And that's what I really need. We're at a small school. I need you to know your students. And then going to Drew's question, how did you build a relationship that maybe didn't start out positive with a colleague? Because also, you don't have a lot of choices. Like, Drew's not joking. You can't, like, skip over somebody and just go talk to the next cleaner, because you only got so many to talk to. You only have, like, so many people in academic, so many people in diversity, so many people in each office. I mean, my office is myself, a secretary, and 5 RDs. That's it. So if you don't want to work with one of my RDs, you got to work with one of them. So you only have so many choices. And a lot of times people forget that. But I also love it, because then we can be involved in so much. We work with our athletics, like, way more than probably you would get at a bigger school. Like, we know our coaches. They have my cell phone number. They have my RD's cell phone number. We know our UP officers. I know academic advising. I know EOP. I know C-STEP. Heck, I can walk down the hallway and talk to them. But, like, it also makes it so you don't have to have those starting conversations, because they're already happened. Because it's like, hey, you're on a committee and look at everybody you're meeting. Go play with them. Go have fun. Be nice. Behave. So it is really knowing your area. It is knowing that you get lots of diversity with different departments. So if residence life is not your cup of tea, you can see what might be. Or you might be shocked and find out, wow, I really like C-STEP, or I really like EOP, and I might switch to that. Going back a little bit about benefits and stuff, also look at what you're getting. So what is your health insurance coverage? How long is it? What is your apartment status? Is it live on or live off? And if it's live on, is it a certain amount versus live off? Definitely look up those websites about cost and everything. And then what do you get with the apartment, and how long can you stay in it? Because some places have it so you can only stay the time that you're actually an RD, and you might only be a 10-month agreement, even though you're a 12-month contract. So then for 2 months, where are you living? With mom and dad in their living room? Like, you might want to know those things. Just stuff to look at. There's lots of benefits. There's lots of perks with every job. It's just what perks and benefits work best for you, because it's not going to work best for the next person. And that's the only thing that matters during your job search, is that you find the best place for you. And if anybody wants to come and see cows every day and horses, I'm going to have a position open in May. So feel free to reach out to me and I'll hire you. So just putting it out there. But we have every kind of animal on campus. A lot of schools don't. So it just matters, like, again, what do you want to do? Do you want to go work with Steve and be in Art World USA, which totally is my cup of tea. So I would go work with Steven in a minute. Or do you want to go to Green Bay and cheer on the Green Bay Packers? Heck yeah. Or go to South Carolina where it's warm right now because I'm sitting in a snow belt. So, like, it just matters, like, what your cup of tea is. So make sure you find the right fit for you, because at the end of the day, you have to be happy.
I think another thing, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Gail, but one thing that came to mind as you're looking through jobs is also, don't worry as much about the title as what the job description is, because you'll also find at smaller schools, our job descriptions sound a little different than what you might expect when you read the title. So for example, And since Beth is giving shameless plugs, I am too. I actually have a position posted with TPE right now, and it says Assistant Director of Residence Life. And I know for some folks who are finishing grad school this May or this June, they look at that and go, well, I'm not ready to be an assistant director. But if you are a talented new professional, yes, you absolutely can be an assistant director at a small school. And some of the cool benefits that come with that are, not just the breadth of experience you have, but also the depth you're going to get. Yes, you can run new staff selection. You are going to be a key player in our housing selection process. You're going to be talking with outside groups as we set up our summer conferences. And those are things that, yes, we think you can do as a new professional, and we're going to be able to support you in doing those things. So don't shy away from a job just because you see the title. Read through that description, and if you say, yeah, I think I can do this, come talk to us about it, because we want to have those conversations. It might be a little more of a reach. It might not feel as safe as, an RD position at a larger institution. But if you think you can do it and you want to give it a try, we want to have a conversation with you about it.
Also look in,
Go ahead.
also on highered.com, check out other jobs because they have really weird titles. It's where a lot of us fall, to be honest, because we don't easily fall under resident director or whatever. Like there's different things. So if you're on highered.com, look at other jobs. You might find something really cool and interesting. Just putting it out there.
I want to jump in, and I don't want to be too repetitive, but I was one of those hall directors at a large public institution, and managed a building of 1,000 students, and I was in it to win it. I was one of those people who was like, oh my gosh, I am going to begin my career as a hall director, and I'm going to end my career as a hall director. I'm always going to be happy living in, and I was, and as I said before, I was very thankful for all of those experiences, right? But I took a chance and went to a small institution, and it was only then that I think I started to understand my growth potential. Being at a large public institution, we did not fraternize a lot with the people in admissions, or we utilized career services as a resource, but we didn't interact a lot with those individuals, right? And so moving to a small institution, all of a sudden I felt that, didn't just feel, it happened that I was shoulder tapped to go on recruitment trips and meet with potential students and their parents, and a lot of different opportunities in those regards. And all of a sudden it was mind blowing for me, in that I was like, wow, I had never, and maybe this was me being a young professional, but I had never stopped to consider that I had different interests, which we talked about already, but that I had potential in different areas. And I also didn't have to, being at a small school, I didn't have to pigeonhole myself and say, I want to work in admissions, or I want to work in academic advising. All of a sudden I had opportunity to dabble. And I find that those things continue to be true. I think the pandemic has allowed some of those things to happen. When we, quote unquote, closed down a year ago, my goodness, it's been a year already, my housing program, we assumed the responsibility for things like the campus cupboard and many endeavors with the Pride Center. And again, it's just so refreshing that every day is so different. Being a hall director, I had variety within my day. There was always a crisis or something to deal with, but this is a different kind of variety. And even at my age, I still continue to be enthusiastic and motivated because of all the different opportunities that are afforded me at a small institution. So I'm sorry, there's a whole lot of word vomit, but I think that that's the message I want to convey to all of you, is that sometimes there's a small school that potential for growth is really cultivated, and every day is a new adventure. And I so enjoy coming to work every day in this smaller setting.
And so please keep your questions coming in the chat. I think we've done a good job of covering quite a few of the benefits of working at a small school, but maybe we take those rose-colored glasses off just a little further and talk a bit more about some of the challenges we face being at a small school. I think the most obvious one, as we talked about, not having a lot of coworkers in each of our different areas. I think a really important thing for somebody working at a small school is to be networking with their colleagues at other similar sized institutions. We don't have a dozen other people right with us in our office that we can go and connect with when we have questions. So we have to work a little harder to, call the school down the road, call the school, the next state over, call the other people in our athletic conference, whatever the case may be, and really work hard to build those relationships. And I think the really great thing is, more often than not, at least in my experience working at small schools, we don't have a whole lot of state secrets. We are always willing to talk and share and network, and we're really excited to get those phone calls and emails from our friends at other schools. So I know sometimes, we think about our rivals and things like that, but really when it comes to our professional work, those are really great opportunities to build relationships there too. But certainly it's something we have to do more intentionally than you might otherwise do if you can walk into an office and pick several people's brain all at once.
I guess I can jump in on this one as well. I think, and we kind of touched on it briefly before already, but time management is going to be really big. So if there is a downside, and I don't want to call it a downside of working at a small school, is that you might be overtaxed and you might be overworked. And it's really important to know what your limitations are. And it's really important to know how to professionally say, no, I can't take that on, or no, I don't have the bandwidth for that. Yes, the great thing, like we mentioned before, is that you will get a lot of different experiences. You can work in different departments that you probably wouldn't be able to work in or work with at a bigger school. For example, part of my role here, I have a secondary role where I work through HR as well as an ombuds associate. So I, though, have made it very clear that my bandwidth at my institution right now is full. And I know how to say that professionally without, hurting anybody's feelings or being rude or seeming like I don't want to take on a new task. So it's really important to know your limitations and how much you can do, because you can easily be taxed on with other areas and other responsibilities. At my last institution, besides being an area coordinator, I was also a Title IX investigator. And to be honest, that was way too much work for one person whenever you had a case to deal with, and then you had to do your normal res life job. So I think it's important to know how to say no. And since Drew and Beth both did some shameless plugs about their open positions, I will do the same and say that I actually have a temp summer resident director position available that I'll be posting shortly if you're interested. It's for pre-college programs and residence life program. So if you're interested, let me know. Just a shameless plug as well if you're looking for something temporary for the summer.
I thought, why not throw it in there, right?
Why not?
We've got a couple of, go ahead.
The other thing, so you have to learn how to say no, but you also have to learn how to say yes, because that will actually help your career. So one of my colleagues bought me this notebook that has yes and no, but my son will say it also has on. So it is a notebook that I write in a lot, but it literally has it on both sides. It's on Amazon, but she bought for me for Christmas because her whole thing is I need to learn how to say no. But sometimes the really cool thing about small schools is you get to learn how to say yes to opportunities you would never have. So like, just don't make sure that like your cup stays half full. Like, don't drain yourself with saying yes, but like know when to say no, but know when to say yes. If that makes any sense at all. You don't want to be the yes man, but you might get to really add some really cool bullet points to your resume or get a certificate or a leadership thing by saying yes at the right time. That's my little plug about yes and no.
And we've had a handful of questions, so I want to see if we can run through these quickly because our time is starting to run short. The first one from Dan, do you have any special posting places other than the specific institution's TPE or higher ed jobs? Many small institutions, unfortunately, don't have many jobs open at the moment. And I think the trickiness to this is there's a lot of us looking, but we might only have one position, and it's so much easier to see those larger schools when they have more positions. TPE and higheredjobs.com are the two main places that I look for. Obviously excited to be here and having conversations and being part of the placement exchange. But yeah, it really can be a matter of just having to, if you have a region you want to be in, seeking out what schools are there and going school page by school page. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of other advice. Gail, Stephen, Beth, any other places you go to?
I would suggest looking at OPE.com, Oshkosh Placement Exchange, especially good for Midwestern placements. That's someplace we recruit every year. I've attended as a candidate and a recruiter. And since we're doing shameless plugs, I too will have an area coordinator position that I'm posting in the near future. So if Green Bay is your jam, keep me in mind.
Social media, the Facebook pages of the college. Also, there are a couple Facebook higher ed, just jobs. All it is jobs, asking how to help you get through the job interview process to here's a posting. So look at Facebook, look at Twitter. Those are the two places I see jobs posted in social media. And then if you're looking locally, sometimes they use like the local papers and stuff because some schools have like a really cheap, like doesn't cost you much to put in the newspaper. We do a lot of our cleaners that way and things like that. Not really my res life positions, but sometimes the small privates have like a really good deal with the local newspaper. So check out those if you have a specific area you're trying to look. But that would be my social media thing. Does that make sense or no? Okay.
To Drew's point, also, I think Drew hit it on the nail. You should definitely, you should be, I imagine, narrowing down where you're willing to relocate to, if you are willing to relocate, and where you're going. Going to the institution's website and their HR department site and looking at the jobs open is probably better than everything else, because I will tell you that when I was looking for my jobs, when I was in your shoes doing my next job search, I primarily wanted to move away from New York City and go to Philadelphia area. I literally went onto every Philadelphia school's site and saw that there was an opening at UPenn, opening at Curtis, and opening at Jefferson. And I applied for all three directly. They were not yet posted on higher ed. I'm pretty sure I made it into the final category for a position at UPenn, partially because they had gotten over 8,000 applicants for that position or something like that, ridiculous. And I'm pretty sure that the only reason why I even made the cut is because I applied in the very beginning when they posted it on their website and not a month and a half later when they posted it on higher ed jobs. So if you can actually apply early once it's like posted, surprisingly people are like, if they see, unfortunately the way it works sometimes, if they see they get like 100 applications right off the bat from that opening, they might not put it on TPE at all. They're not, or not TPE, higher ed or any of the other services, because it's a cost factor for them as well. So going on the individual school sites is like key. That worked for me in many ways.
Also set time aside. Looking for a job is a job.
Yep.
So you need to like set time aside. So you're going to search all those schools that you want to work at, their HR sites, every Wednesday from 7 to 9. Watch Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy while you're doing it. Put them in a Excel file. I am a tech girl, so I used a Google Doc every time I search. You can look at all the places I searched, what letters I sent, what school. Please make sure to say the right school name in your letter, okay? I don't mean to sound that way, but I can't tell you how many times we get letters for a position and it says, hi, I don't know, Canton, I would love to work at your school for this job. Not the right job position, not the right college. Really quick I saw one that popped up, which I loved. How diverse is the faculty staff at small schools? Amazingly diverse. You wouldn't think that, but I'm not joking. I've worked at a historically Black college that was considered small. That was the WL in the office is what they called me. Yeah, long story. Really fun though. And then I worked at a college that was a third, Black, white, Hispanic. The college I'm at right now, we're about 40% diversity on campus. Students like small schools just like they like big schools. The diversity is really the same. It just sometimes when you have like a special program, like an art or a tech or something like that, you only pull a certain aspect. But if you're at a liberal arts school, I haven't seen the diversity be different than at a big liberal arts school. So diversity is still the same. It's amazing. You would be shocked. I was shocked a little bit too. But that question, I really wanted to jump ahead. I know there's 2 more ahead. Can you talk about the flip side of going from small institution to large a little bit? I can talk about small to middle, not large. Do you feel like large institutions discount the small school experience? Matters who you talk to. I really laughed when Drew said the Ohio State. I was in the Akuhoi region for a little while. You get really sick of that. You just call them Ohio State. It kind of bothers them. It's a lot of fun. Sorry. And then I think it's a person. Like, I think the value of anybody with any experience is important. I don't care if you come from the biggest college in the country to the smallest college in the country. I think it's the individual. That's my personal opinion. I think it matters who you run into. And can you come up with a student profile for a small school environment, or can those? Yeah, and honestly, a lot of times the profiles and stuff are right on their websites. So you can see the diversity. You can see where their students are coming from. Are they out of state? Are they in state? Morrisville, we got a ton of kids from Kentucky. It's because of our equine program. You would never know that, right? So it's all that stuff is normally right on the website.
But what I wanted to say to that student profile, though, is, you know, a lot of people have this vision of small schools as being a bit more elite, being more expensive. They look at that initial dollar amount. What you will find for many of us is that we are competitive with our state school counterparts, and sometimes given our financial aid cheaper than our state school counterparts. And so you will find a lot of students who are Pell eligible, who are working a second job to work their way through school here as well, just as they would if they were at a state school. We have very diverse student bodies. And to Beth's point, I think even in areas where we may lack in diversity, just kind of the student population that we draw to small private liberal arts schools, because that's my experience, there is a curiosity and a want to understand that diversity and an appreciation of it. And so even in areas where we may lack it, it is not something that is ignored. It is something we want to search and learn more about. So really difficult to know that without spending a little time on the campus and asking those questions. And certainly a question you should ask of every employer. And Beth, thank you for running through those questions, because I wanted to make sure we touched on them, but I see we're right up at the edge of our time. And so I wanted to give each of the panelists just, 15, 30 seconds. Give us your last one great piece of job search advice as we wrap up the panel for today.
I guess I can go first. One of the things, and I kind of touched on it a little bit before, that worked for me and is a great little tip is if you can stay, like we mentioned before, if you know what universities you want to work at or what region you want to work at, if you can stay on top of monitoring their postings, being one of the first people to apply for the position does help. I mean, it doesn't mean you're going to get the job, but it does help significantly, especially if that HR director is getting a pile of resumes and applications. They're going to go through the first pile first and do some interviews with that. And then if they don't find somebody, through those 50 first folks, then they'll move on to the next 50, or they might never ever get to that next 50 because they found their final 3 in the first 50. So being in that first group of people that applies actually can make or break you in many ways. I know it sounds so trivial, but it really is a numbers game. I mean, if there's 300 people applying for a position, HR departments are not going to sit and go through every resume that came in sometimes, unfortunately.
Know yourself. That's the one thing I always tell people. You are you. Know yourself. Make sure that you take time to search for a job. A job should not be something that you do when you have a moment. You should set aside time. Also, use your resources. If there's someone that can review your resume, if there's someone you can reach out to for guidance, do a mock interview, especially right now because everybody's doing them through a camera. We're not doing them in person. So get that feedback from somebody like, do I have facial expressions that do not work when I'm doing an interview? Am I not dressed properly when I'm doing an interview? Does this not look right? Because you're not in person a lot right now. And also don't get discouraged. There are not as many jobs at this moment due to COVID. Doesn't mean that there won't be soon. Okay, let's get COVID away and we can maybe go back to a new world. I'm not going to say back to the old way because who knows what that looks like. But just be yourself, ask questions, and just, I don't know, be you. Like, that's my big thing. I always get frustrated when people aren't themselves. But you also have all of us. If you need to reach out to any of us, we would all help you.
The only thing I would add is to be sure that you're digging into those position descriptions. Know what experiences you want to have in your portfolio, and don't discount a particular institution because where it is geographically located or the size of the institution. It's okay now more than ever to take a risk and just make sure that you're diversifying your career path.
And for me, I would say this is going to sound like I'm talking out both sides of my mouth, but always keep job searching. Always know what is out there and how the position descriptions are changing. Even once you have a job, read through and see what other things people are adding into a particular position you're interested in, so you can keep working through those experiences and trying to figure out how to build your portfolio, as Gail was saying. At the same time, you will always find a position description when you have a job that will make you go, oh, but this could be better. And know that usually the grass isn't actually greener on that other side. It's just a different shade of green. And so even when you are feeling frustrated, there can be a lot to appreciate about the place that you are at currently. And so while you're always looking for those positions, don't get so excited that you suddenly start to dream away from the job you are in. Do your job well, but certainly understand what else is out there. And with that, I'll wrap up. I have loved the questions that we've had the opportunity to answer for you. As our panelists have said, we're always happy to answer more if you want to reach out to any of us. Thank you so much for spending an hour with us. We have really appreciated it. And good luck as you all continue your searches.